Hi, I'm Andrew,
And I'm Sam.
and this is Teens Talk Politics, and this is week 2 of our news podcast covering the week's news and events that happened in politics. And the first one that we want to cover is the New York mayoral race that happened Tuesday night this week.
Yeah, pretty big
Any
deal.
thoughts, Sam?
Yeah, it's been really interesting. It's been very close for all candidates involved. I mean, since it's New York, it's heavily Democratic. Andrew Yang was doing very well, but then just kind of fell out of nowhere. Like he just lost support. I think he's very popular among Asian and Latin American communities. But I don't think that was able to take him all the way to the finish
Because
line.
he was the front runner at the beginning, and then slowly but surely in the
Mm-hmm.
polls, his numbers dropped, and then Eric Adams eventually did go ahead of him eventually in the polls, and that's how it ended up on election night. Of course, we don't know who the winner is yet because no one got to 50%, and they have to do the what do you call it? Choice voting.
Yep.
Uh,
I think that's it, right?
well, anyways, basically what happens is if the candidate doesn't get 50% of the vote, the person with the least amount will get eliminated, and then their second choice, the voters get a second choice, and their second choice would be given to the other candidates, and then they keep doing that until there's only two candidates or someone gets 50% of the vote. And it looks like the only
Yeah.
way for Andrew Yang to win right now is if all the people that are below him in terms of numbers, when they get eliminated, basically all their votes have to go to Andrew Yang. And even then, it would be very, very close, and that's very unlikely. And on Tuesday night, around, was it like 11 or so, Andrew Yang did concede, saying something along the lines of, from the numbers we're seeing
He
now, I
knows.
won't be the mayor of New York City. So it does look like right now Eric Adams will win, but we don't know, like I said, because ranked choice voting, the uh, the other ballots haven't been counted for the second choice vote. If that makes any sense of how I explained ranked choice voting, I might have explained that very poorly, but that's the main rundown of how it works.
Yep. So yeah, I think it's been very interesting, and I know a lot of races are happening across the nation right now, but New York is a big deal. I think um, it's really just been a matter of like just who appeals to the most groups in the race so far. Because I think Andrew Yang is very popular, as I said before. Again, Latin American and Asian voters, while what's his name? Oh my God, I can't believe I'm blanking on this. Who's in the lead now?
Eric Adams?
Uh, Eric Adams is very popular among black voters.
Yeah, and also we mentioned this on Tuesday's episode. He was the one that quoted, it's easier to get a gun in this city than it is to get a vaccine. And he was very low in the polls at the beginning, but slowly but surely he made his way up there with endorsements from well-known politicians, and eventually getting up in the polls where he was leading. And then, of course, he's now leading the election as of right now when we're recording this. And another thing I want to mention is the main reason why this election is getting so much coverage from national news sources is probably just because it has a bigger population than several states, and the fact that one city can have more population than entire states is kind of crazy. So it's a
So yeah,
very
don't think we're like covering this. Don't think we're covering this because we're biased or anything.
yeah, it's a very large deal to be the mayor, and of course, if you become the mayor, you can slowly move your way up. For example, like Mike Bloomberg, he was the mayor, and
Yeah,
eventually he ran for president.
Pete-
Rudy Giuliani,
yeah.
he was the mayor. Eventually, he ran for president.
Yeah.
Now he's Trump's attorney. So slowly but surely, this is a big step. If whoever wins, it's gonna look like it's Eric Adams. It'll help him just in general with his political career.
I mean, and it's all very appealing candidates too. Like I think it's just kind of what the majority of voters want. I don't think that many groups and voters are too political about this. No group really hates the other. They just kind of prefer one candidate, and I think that's pretty solid that it's going that way.
And I will say, I think the main reason that Andrew Yang was leading at the beginning, and now he's fourth place, is I do believe it's because he had a lot of publicity from running for president, especially when he said, "I'll give you $1,000 every month." That was while he was president. He can't do that because he does the funds being just local offices like in New York City. But I think that's the main reason he was leading the polls, because the only person that anybody knew out of the candidates was him, because he ran for president. And as the names of the other candidates were spread around New York City, they became more popular because probably just because they had more experience in politics. Andrew Yang has never held public office because he was just a tech person. So I think that's a big role. They're just looking for someone who has experience in a public office to hold the office of or the mayor of New York City.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but that's not to say that New York isn't wealthy.
Well, I don't get why that would matter. But anyways, next story. H.R. 1, the voting rights bill, gets filibustered in the Senate, and this is a big letdown for basically minorities in general.
Mm-hmm.
Because states like Texas, Georgia, Florida, Arizona all are having new voting rights, voting suppression bills that are going through their state legislatures that are basically stopping minorities and people that aren't in the best space in terms of financials to be able to vote, because they're asking you to have an ID, and they're like, okay, so why do you need an ID to get a drink, but you don't need an ID to vote? And the thing is, to drink, it costs money because you have to buy the beer, so it shouldn't be a problem for you to have to go get a driver's license so you can have an ID. It shouldn't be a problem for you to get a home so you can have an address, which you would need to vote now, because you need to have an address and an ID in most of these states that are putting these new bills on the table. And a big problem with this is minorities, which in this country they have a disadvantage, so a lot of them will not have they're not going to be in the best places in terms of financials, so they might not have a home, so they won't have an address. Mm-hmm. They might not be able to afford to get a driver's license, so they won't have an ID, so then they can't vote. When every American should have the right to vote, regardless of whether or not they have a house to live in, regardless if they have a driver's license or another sort of ID to be able to vote.
Yeah, and these limitations are not only making it more difficult for minorities to vote, but also just making minorities not want to vote in general, right? Like,
because if they have to,
like, some people can be ashamed when they walk into the voting place. It's like, and so it's like, and they have to it's like, what's my vote's gonna matter? And so with every vote counting, we need all people to be endorsed to get the most accurate results in a election.
Well, just in general, I think the main reason why people wouldn't be as eager to vote if you're a minority is because, especially in Texas, it's been shown throughout the state that places with a higher minority population will have less voting machines regardless of the population of the territory. However, if it's a high people that basically are white, they will be prioritized in terms of voting machines than people that are of color or another race. And this is, they say it's not because of racial issues, but it obviously is, because you can't have this happen over and over in Texas and just pretend it's a coincidence. I get if it happens once, but if it's happening throughout the state, it's obviously not a coincidence, because they know that people of the minorities, just in general, they vote more Democratic, and these Republicans want to keep winning. And if minorities aren't voting, they're going to stay in office most likely. And a big drawback for minorities is, well, it's only one person, so what is one vote going to matter? If I have to wait for 3 hours to go to the one voting machine that's in my entire county, that's a majority-minority county, and at the end of the day, well, what if nobody voted that was a minority? Then basically Republicans would stay in office and would never leave until they want to.
And that could change the tide of the election.
Yes, and going back to the part of why Republicans don't support in this H.R. 1 in the Senate, it's for that very reason, because they know, at least majority of them, I think, are smart enough to know that their population that votes for them and keeps them in office are mainly white, uneducated voters, people that don't go to college. Of course, there's about 1 in 10 black voters that support Republicans, about 3 in 7 Hispanic voters that support Republicans, and about half of white educated that go to college voters vote Republican. But in general, they're like, okay, so the voters that vote for me are people that can afford an ID, can afford to have a house and get an address, and have time out of their work schedule to go vote. So they were like, okay, why don't we need an HR 1 bill if we're just going to stay in power longer? And that's what they're trying to look for. How long can I stay in power? They're more worried about, am I going to be able to keep this job than actually doing their job and helping the American people.
Yeah, we got a taste of that in the last presidential election, where with black and Hispanic voter turnout really changed the course of the election. And so I think also the Democrats were also pushing this just so that either both also to get equality, but also to get equality in voting, and also so that they could get maybe an edge in some future elections. Which, I mean, I'm not sure if that's their real intention or not. Probably for some of them, but it's a very strategic move for Democrats, and I think it's also kind of exposing kind of the Republicans, so what they'll do, like, to stay in power. So I think it's pretty strategic by the Democrats, and it's pretty eye-opening as well.
Well, I will say you did mention that it was the Hispanic and black turnout, and I will say, yes, it's both of those, but mainly the black turnout, because Hispanics did turn away from the Democratic Party more than it did to Hillary Clinton or Barack
Hispanics were
Obama.
50-50.
Because Trump did get more of the Hispanic vote than basically anybody since Bush. And that's because of this whole, the Democrats are socialists, and a lot of these Hispanic voters come from socialist countries, and they see how it is, when that's a complete lie. That's just propaganda that was put out by the Trump campaign, turning away Hispanic voters.
Just more minority turnout is what I'm trying to push.
Okay, so the next story is the protest that happened in Washington, D.C., and this also relates back to the HR 1 bill, the Voting Rights Act, getting filibustered. And basically what this protest was is protesting against Republican senators that filibustered this bill. And also, and this is also for Joe Manchin and Krista Sinema to get rid of the filibuster so they can pass HR 1. I don't know if it did much, because no Republicans changing their mind, and Joe Manchin and Krista Sinema are not changing their mind on the filibuster. They still want to keep the filibuster because they're thinking ahead, okay, when I'm in the minority in the Senate, I don't want Republicans to just pass whatever they want and we can't stop them. But also you have to think, well, we have a trifecta. By we, I mean Democrats. We have a trifecta in government, and we can't seem to pass anything at this point because of the filibuster.
So it's rather... it's like rather you try to pass it, or rather nothing goes through. It's like, and it's not like it's going to actually, like, allow a minority to get a vote. Like, no, that's just not allow a minority to get it. In fact, that's what it's doing now. But, so, it makes sense why people like Joe Manchin are doing this.
And I think when Chuck Schumer, he voted to get rid of the rule that you could filibuster a vote to confirm a Supreme Court justice, and while he was in the majority. And while he was in the minority, Judge Kavanaugh was able to get a vote without being filibustered, and that came back to bite him. But at the end of the day, it's more important for the seat to go ahead and get filled, so we have 9 justices on the bench. And I think a lot of people are worried, like Joe Manchin is worried, that will this come back to bite us again like it did last time when we changed the rules on the filibuster? And I think it will be a yes. It's going to come back to bite them, but I think at the end of the day, it's the right thing to do. The American people voted for Democrats to get in office so they can change things. And if they can't get anything done because of the filibuster, they definitely need to get rid of it. That's my opinion on that. Any other thoughts on that, Sam?
Yeah, I think it's good to discuss what we think is going to happen. And so even if it is going to maybe bite you in the butt later, right? Like, it's good it's going to be good typically in the long run, because you and your party can pass more stuff if you play the election fairly, and if you the majority. And number two, it's just doing the right thing. Like, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's not a big... Yeah, it's the right thing.
And before we move on, I do want to mention how I did say the American people did vote for Democrats to be in office. And that's the excuse that Republicans put back in 2016 when they were redoing the tax code. 2017, sorry. They were doing redoing the tax code. But the argument against that is, in 2020, a majority of voters voted for Democrats to control the Senate. A majority of voters voted for Biden to be president. A majority of voters voted for Democrats to control the House. In 2016, a majority of voters voted for a Democrat to control the White House, Hillary Clinton. A majority of voters voted for Democrats to control the Senate. We didn't control the Senate. And I don't get that argument. They're saying the American people chose Republicans to hold the Senate, chose Republicans to hold the House. Sorry, not... Well, yes, they voted... The Republicans won the popular vote in the House in 2016. They did not win the popular vote in the presidency either. So the argument doesn't work in terms of the popular vote. It's all about what seats were up for re-election. So I don't think that argument works very well in that circumstance, but I think here it does because we won the popular vote in both the House, in all three, the House, the Senate, and the presidency. And then for our next story is a minor story, but Biden's dog Champ did die. And it's pretty sad for the family because it's been with them for a very long time. Any thoughts on that, Sam?
Yeah, I think it's sad because he's been kind of like an icon of Biden's just kind of dad image. So it's obviously as another dog, I forget the name. Does he? Well, anyway. So yeah, it's like, so I think it's really sad because Champ's been with the Biden family for many years and he's been stuck through it a lot. He's been what was Bo Obama's best friend, had the White House lawn back when in Obama's presidency, who Bo has also recently passed away. So yeah, it's coming at a bit sorrow time for presidential dogs, but
yeah, and it's nice that we have dogs back in the White House because the Trump administration didn't have any pets.
Yeah.
And now we have dogs back at the White House. So that was a very short story. So next one is Biden is going to be coming to Raleigh to try to get more people vaccinated. I think it's a strange move for them to come to Raleigh in North Carolina because North Carolina has a low vaccination rate, but I feel like he should be going to places like Mississippi, which has the lowest in the country, to try to get people vaccinated. But also at the same time, North Carolina was a very close state that almost voted for Biden, while Mississippi wasn't really that close, and for Biden to come to Mississippi wouldn't much do things because people don't trust him.
It's probably a smart move by Biden. Number one, he can gain publicity and take initiative, which could help him further down the line, and help his administration further down the line. And also, he's not going to have any luck with states like Mississippi, right?
Well,
like if he says people get vaccinated, like for those a lot more right-leaning states, like they're not going to listen to him.
But I think
a lot of people will listen to Biden. I think if he's in North Carolina.
Well, even in North Carolina, I didn't vote for Biden, so a majority of voters probably won't trust him because they didn't vote for him.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, but still, he's going to have better luck in North Carolina.
Yeah, he'll have better luck. But I still think it was a pretty strange decision for him to come here. Maybe I don't know all the facts. I don't know why he really chose here, but to me, it seems like a strange decision. But
I mean, it looks like he's trying to take initiative, but
well, he is. He does
not doing it. Well, yeah, obviously, but and so I think, but he's also just trying to make sure he's getting everyone vaccinated, and yeah, I think he's just trying to do it to make sure he's still being good with in the battleground state of that is North Carolina.
Yeah. And if more people get vaccinated, it'll look better on Biden. It'll look better on his administration as a whole. And I think that could, like you said, it could help him down the line, saying, you know who started this coronavirus? It was our previous administration. You know who ended the pandemic with the coronavirus? It was our administration. So, because if Trump does decide to run in 2024, and if Biden also runs in 2024, it'll be like a rematch. Hasn't happened in a long time. But
yeah.
In general, yes, I think that'll help them later down the line. And our next story is about the infrastructure bill. And anyways, yes, Republicans have been refusing to budge on this bill. I think it was Ron Portman of Ohio said it needs to be a more narrow bill. It needs to be purely infrastructure, because Democrats had a different definition of infrastructure. It's not just physical infrastructure, but also helping people financially and in other ways like that. And I think if they're going to have a bipartisan deal, I think it has to be a more narrow bill just in general. And Tim Scott of South Carolina has been trying to work bipartisanly. Is bipartisanly a word? I don't know. But trying to work in a bipartisan way with Democrats to try to get this bill passed. And I think for him, if he's actually doing this to try to help the American people, very good, because in the past it doesn't look like Republicans don't even want to work with Democrats to try to pass anything. Like McConnell said, their number one priority is to try to block anything that the Biden White House puts forward, and that's not going to help the American people. It's not even necessarily going to look good on them, so I don't really think that's going to help them in the midterms whatsoever. However, yes, it's good for Tim Scott to help them.
They're just being stubborn at their point. The only people, the only people that they're appealing to now is hardline Republicans in their state, in their respective states. It's not like they're just being stubborn. They're just trying to keep up with this Trumpist way, which is definitely not helping them.
Yeah. Okay, for our last story, this is a story about crazy people. So we have Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert. How do you pronounce that?
Boebert, I believe.
Boebert. And they're trying to impeach the president over dealings with the border. Whether or not that's going to work, it's probably less than 0% chance because Democrats control the House and the Senate, so I don't really think that's going to work very well. They're going to have to sway a lot of votes in the House and a lot of votes in the Senate.
Yeah, and so it's like, and so two things are wrong with this, right? Number one, I mean, Trump's handling of the border was nowhere near perfect as well, and back in his administration, and it's like Biden, like, is this all that you can call for Biden to impeach? It's like, are you serious? Is this your best option to call him over the border crisis, which is still under development, still hasn't finished?
Yeah, and I would understand if it was a scandal, but this isn't a scandal. Trump's first impeachment, that was a scandal. His second one, he was trying to sack the Capitol. Those are much more worthy causes to impeach a president over than failed policies at the border, which Trump himself, like you said, didn't have perfect policies at the border either. They were inhumane policies. They worked because they stopped people coming over, but they were inhumane, ripping people from their parents. And for him to get impeached over, which it's less than 1% for him to do that, he won't get impeached. But just for the bill to come up at all is pretty sad to see.
Yeah. And it's like, so what are you guys trying to accomplish here? Like, make Biden look bad? Like, rally right-wingers? It's like, neither of that's gonna work, because both you and your supporters know that this is a lost cause. It's like, nobody really cares. In fact, you could be just screwing yourself over for impeaching someone, attempting to impeach someone for petty offense, because if Republicans in the House and Senate don't agree with them, they're gonna look real dumb. If they're not already.
Yeah. And then I think that basically wraps up our podcast for today. We ended it a little bit short.
Yeah.
But if we did miss up in any facts, just tell us in the comments. And this has been Teens Talk Politics. Thank you for watching. Make sure to tune in to the next episode on Tuesday.